Hi everyone, Will here, and welcome to my channel, a channel dedicated to learning how to play a game called Fano, a game I invented in the fall of 2018. Fano is not your typical card game. Even though it is played with a standard deck, it is far more like a combat trading card game like Magic the Gathering, as opposed to other card games that are played with a standard deck like Rummy, Poker, or Solitaire. In these videos, I'm going to try to keep them all about 5 to 10 minutes long and cover different aspects of the game. For this first video, we'll be covering and learning the basics, including how to win the game, the 3 card types, the 3 phases of a player's turn, and how to set up the board. Also, please be sure to visit my website at www.fan-o.com for more information. So let's jump right in. In Fano, each player plays with a single suit of cards, which means that up to 4 players can play a standard deck. There are 3 card types in Fano. The first are the commander cards, Jack, Queen, and King. The second are your prestige cards, 8, 9, and 10. And finally, the last are your combat cards, Ace through 7. The first one I'd like to discuss with you are the commander cards. The commander cards mark the position of a current player's progress. Every player starts off as a Jack, and through the progress of the game can promote from a Jack to a higher Queen, and eventually promote again from a Queen to a King. If a player promotes one last time, they will win the game. The first player to promote 3 times wins the game. In order to promote, a player must have all 3 prestige cards out in play at the same time. If the 8, 9, and 10 are out during the main phase, a player may sacrifice the 8, 9, and 10 and promote their Jack to a Queen in this case. Lastly, we have the combat cards. The combat cards can be played at the end of turn. They also can be used to attack your opponent's combat cards, and they can also be used to combine together in order to make the prestige cards. Unlike combat cards, prestige cards cannot be played at the end of turn. They also cannot be used in attack, and they cannot be attacked. For combining, a player must use 2 cards. The cards in play need to add together to the sum of a card in hand. In this case, the player has a 7 and an ace out on the field, and they have an 8 in hand. What they can do is they can combine their 7 and ace for their prestige card. The player would have to do this 2 more times in order to get the 9 and 10 out so that they can promote from the Queen, in this case, to the King. And that covers the 3 card types. If we were playing a 2-player game, the board would be set up such that the commander cards would be placed face up in front of each player. The remaining cards, the prestige and combat cards, would be shuffled and placed as a draw pile next to the commanders. In addition to the commander pile and the draw pile, there is a discard pile and 4 field slots for each player. The field slots are where you can place combat cards at the end of turn. Prestige cards can also be placed in the field slots and be sacrificed in those locations. The discard pile will accept all of the attacked cards, as well as any cards that are discarded at the end of turn. Let's start a match between these 2 players. There are 3 main phases for each player. The phases are the draw step, the main phase, and the end turn step. During the draw step, each player will draw up to 3 cards. This player drew 2 combat cards and 1 prestige card. During the main phase, they can use cards they have in their field slots to attack their opponent or combine for other cards. Unfortunately, this player does not have any field slots at the beginning of the game. Therefore, main phase is skipped, and the player will proceed to the end turn step. During the end turn step, the player has 3 options. They can either play a combat card from their hand, in this case the 4 or the 6, into one of the field slots. Or they can substitute one of the cards in play by placing it in the discard and then putting a combat card into play to replace that card. The last option is to discard cards from hand. If a player does so, they can discard as many cards as they want. The more cards you discard, the more cards you will draw in the next turn. The key to discarding is that these are the only cards that would be placed face down in the discard pile. If a player's card is attacked, the attacked cards are placed face up so that the opponent can see what is in the discard pile. For this end turn, we will play the 6 and place this hand down. That means it's the next player's turn. They proceed to their draw step and draw 3 cards. They have 2 combat cards and a prestige card. In this case, a 6 can attack both a 3 and a 7, and therefore it may be best to discard this hand and draw new ones. However, 3 and 7 can also combine later for a 10, so it might be possible to combine after 2 turns if they cannot attack the 3 or 7. This player decides to play the 3 and hold on to the hand. This ends their turn. Now it is first player's turn. To their 2 cards, they will draw an additional card, and they drew an additional combat card. A 6 can attack a 3 only if you have a 4 in hand. In this case, if player 1 attacks 3, both the 6 and the 3 will go to the discard pile, and the 4 will come out into play. A 4 then can be used for additional main phase options, like attacking additional cards. However, there are no cards in play, so this player will now proceed to the end turn step, where they will play the 5 from hand into play. They could also alternatively choose to substitute cards. If they did not like their 4, they could discard the 4 and substitute with a 5. Lastly, they also could discard the cards in hand to draw more cards. However, because they have the 9 in hand, it might behoove them to play the 5 and end their turn. Now it is second player's turn. They will draw an additional card and play a 4, ending their turn. Once again it is player 1's turn. They will draw 2 more cards in order to get to 3. And at this point, they will combine immediately for the 9. When a player combines, they take the 2 cards that sum to the card in hand and place them to the side. The sum card is placed into play, and then the player has options to choose whether or not to keep the 5 or the 4, returning 1 to hand and 1 to the discard, or discarding both. In this case, the player will choose to discard both in order to draw more cards, and play the ace at the end of turn. This concludes our first video on the basics of Fano, where we have covered how to win the game, the 3 card types, the 3 phases of a player's turn, and how to set up the board. I hope this video was helpful, and be sure to check out a few more of the videos on this channel. Until next time, see you soon.